You know, when I think back on when I first met Brian on the streets, passed out, lying in a pool of his own vomit, never in a million years did I think we'd end up here. We'd been knocking around, sleeping rough for years. And I kind of built up a really good relationship with him in that time, a good rapport. And then occasionally he'd get himself into a hostel, but then he'd either get himself into a fight and get kicked out, or because he was an alcoholic and not a junkie, then the drug pushers would force him out. Anyway, so one afternoon I'm getting ready to leave, and Brian appears at the office. Now I assumed that he needed money or he'd got himself into another scrape, but quite tearfully he asked me if I would help him quit drinking. I mean, those are the days when the hard work really pays off. You know, it's why we build relationships with people like Brian, so that they know that we're there for them when they need us. You know, you can't just take a user or an alcoholic off the streets, pop them into rehab, get them clean, and then wave them on their merry way. It just doesn't work like that. Unless they're willing to make that change mentally, the first thing they're going to do is head straight to the off licence or to try and score. And like I say, Brian had been knocking around for years. So for him to come to us, asking for help of his own volition, I mean, that was massive. Turned out that he'd been sat, slumped on the pavement somewhere, and some young guy had gone past and taken pity on him, very generously given him about, it was 40 quid. And even though Brian hadn't seen his son for years, there was something about that young guy that really made him think of his son, a son that he really missed, a son that he would desperately want to get hold of, a son who would have been absolutely mortified if he'd seen his father lying quite literally in the gutter like that other young man had. So he decided that he wasn't going to spend that 40 quid on booze. He was going to save it, he was going to get clean and sober, and he was going to find his son. He'd been abusing alcohol and living rough for more than 10 years, and one random act of kindness changed everything. You know, getting clean and sober, it's not something that just happens overnight. And contrary to popular belief, you can't just stop drinking. You know, he'd been through some real shit over the years. So first thing I did was I managed to get him some proper counselling. And I managed to get him into a more safe and secure temporary accommodation. And then bit by bit, day by day, this other guy began to appear. Still damaged, pretty fragile, but this great, funny, warm, caring guy. You get pretty attached to the people that you help. We want everybody to succeed. It's why we invest so much in everyone. And with Brian, I knew the time was coming to hand his case to somebody else, and I had really grown close to him, and him to me. It's so unprofessional, and so unlikely when you think, you think when I first met him, smelling of weed, drunk, living on the streets. But I guess the heart wants what the heart wants. And I'm not going to lie to you, it has not been easy. You know, it's so difficult to remember that he's not the client anymore. The other night we had this massive bust up. He's been getting so wound up and upset about not being able to find his son. And he accused me of not helping enough. And even worse, like standing in his way. And nothing could be further from the truth. I have worked so hard to try and find his son. There's been a lot of dead ends. And there has been stuff that I haven't told him because I didn't want to get his hopes up. But for him to accuse me of not helping, and even worse, getting in the way, I was absolutely furious. So I stormed out. You know, he'd kept that 40 quid pinned to a corkboard in his kitchenette. And he told me that he'd only ever spend it on one of two things. Either it was going to be something meaningful and symbolic. Definitely not bills or rent or food. And the other was that if he couldn't find his son and he felt that he was destined to go back on the streets, then he would just take it to the off license and buy booze. Didn't sleep a wink that night. Next morning, first thing I came round to his place to check if he was all right, check if we were all right. And he wasn't there. And I knew that I was going to have to check on the corkboard. I didn't want to, but I knew I was going to have to. And the money was gone. All that work, all that time, we're back to square bloody one. The next thing, the door goes and I'm spun round like, ooh, and there's Brian. Standing there quite chipper, quite sober. And he apologised for his behaviour. And then he drops down onto one knee and he gets a ring from his pocket. A ring that he had bought and put that 40 quid to. Of course I said yes. We haven't set a date yet. We would really like his son to be there and we haven't managed to find him. So, but yeah, that's where we are. All because of 40 quid.